All right, Jonathan, thanks for joining me today. It's great to meet you.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be on here.
So you are actually the first ever professional poker player to be on my podcast, and also a poker coach. I know I've had a poker someone in the past. I'll have to surface that interview and see if you guys maybe even know each other. But as far as I know, you're definitely the first person who's ever got the kind of numbers you do in the world of poker in terms of results, and also as a coach running a big membership site. That's about all I know about you so far, so I'd love to dive into that history, but also everything else you're doing. And I should say, just for the audience sake, that we actually connected on a Slack room for a syndicate we're a part of with Jason Calacanis and his investment group. So you obviously do angel investing as well. Have I missed anything in summary else that you're kind of involved with or have been involved with?
There's a lot going on, right? No, I mean, you hit the main points. I have a poker training site, pokercoaching.com, and I'm part owner of a publishing company that publishes a lot of poker books. All these books up here, I had my hands in substantially. And I don't know, gone headfirst into NFTs recently. Probably going to torch a bunch of money doing that. But that's it.
What kind of NFTs are you looking at?
Everything. We have some CryptoPunks, we have some Meebits, we have some Bored Apes, we have some gift goats, all sorts of stuff.
Okay, so my audience probably has no idea what any of those things are, but I appreciate the insight.
I didn't have any idea what they were until about a month ago, and then here we are. We're all in, why not?
Just for the sake of the numbers, too, I know obviously with professional poker, a lot of your numbers are reported. Do you have like a summary of your kind of results you can share with us from that world, or...?
Well, so anytime anyone wants to know about anyone's poker results, they can type into Google the person's name, Jonathan Little, and then GPI, that's Global Poker Index, or Hendon Mob, it's kind of the same site, and that will list everyone's cashes. Now, cashes don't necessarily mean profits. Cashes mean how much you have cashed for in tournaments, not counting your buy-ins. So some people who have millions of dollars in winnings are losers. Some people who have hundreds of thousands of dollars in cashes are winners. But I have something like $7 million in cashes, give or take. And I've been around for a long time. I was Player of the Year with a bunch of trophies behind me if you're watching the video here. And I've been around for a long time. So reasonably good poker player. Certainly not the best in the world, but I don't know, top 100 tournament player, give or take. Something like that.
I don't think the averages have won 7 million. But can you clarify when you said like some people can win millions but not be profitable? I know there's all kinds of things going on behind the scenes with people being staked and other things like that. Is that why you might not be profitable, or is it simply the cost of being a professional poker player?
Well, there's all sorts of things, right? I mean, imagine you are a professional poker player and you spend $50,000 a year traveling to fancy casinos, right? So if you win $30,000 in the year, but you spend $50K, you're down $20K out the door, right? Even though your results may say, look, I'm up $50,000, I'm crushing it. But, like, not really, right? Also, there are a lot of high buy-in tournaments. If you look at the top, I don't know, 50 people on those sites I recommended, the Global Poker Index, I would bet some number of them are down despite having, I don't know, $15 million in cashes because they're buying into $25,000 buy-in tournaments or $1 million buy-in tournaments as often as they can. And if you buy in for, $25 million and you cash for 15, you're down $10 million. But I think it's generally thought that in the poker world, you do not want to actually give clear results for people in terms of this player's down $10 million because nobody wants it publicly known that you're a big loser at poker, right? Because that's bad for your business to some extent, right? There are a lot of people who just like to gamble and play some cards, right? And there's always this debate in the poker world of should we have very clear results. And there are thoughts of maybe making specific tournament tours where they are going to put out very clear results of who's the winner and who's the loser. But at the end of the day, you want to play poker with people who are worse than you at poker because that's how you make money. You make money when people make mistakes that you don't make. And that results in you not really wanting the profits and losses of everyone to be very, very clear.
Okay. I didn't realize there was as high as a 25 million buy-in tournament.
No, $25,000 buy-in.
Okay, I was going to say.
But there are $1 million buy-in tournaments.
Okay.
I think the biggest one ever was a £1 million buy-in tournament, which was, I don't know, $1.8 million. So there are a few very big buy-in tournaments.
Yeah.
I don't play in those. The biggest I play is typically about $100,000, and that's on the upper end of what I can handle. It's important to make sure if you're trying to be a professional that you do not act like a degenerate gambler and you don't risk too much at any individual point in time. So you have to have some discipline, and you want to make sure you're playing in games where there are worse players than you. Because if you're the worst player, you're not making any money, and then, well, you're the gambler.
Fair enough. And in terms of your coaching side of the business, any numbers you're happy to talk about there? Because I think that's a pretty big business you've got going, right?
Yeah, we have about, 5,500 active paying members. It's a membership site where we have all sorts of content. We have interactive quizzes. We have live webinars where the students can interact with a lot of the best players in the world in real time. We have live streams where you can watch some of the best poker players play their high-stakes games live and ask them questions. We have in-depth courses. I have a tournament course there that's about 40 hours long, which will teach you everything you need to know to beat poker tournaments. It's big, it's in-depth, it's advanced, but that's the kind of stuff you need to be studying to actually succeed at a reasonably high level. So there's a lot of stuff there. People can check it out at pokercoaching.com/free. And I hired some of the coaches to teach like relatively low-level content because I realized a lot of the people who come to me are beginners. But then I also hired some of the players who are like literally the best in the world, and I hired them to effectively teach me because I'm always trying to learn from the best players in the world. We have one guy who was recently the #1 online tournament player in the world, and he's just playing all the big games and crushing it. And I want to learn from that player. So there's low-level stuff, high-level stuff, whatever you need to succeed at poker is there.
Awesome. Okay, so pokercoaching.com/free if you want to get started for free. That's awesome. Appreciate the share. I'd love to know how that business grew, but I really would like to start at the very beginning here with you, Jonathan. So can we go back even, teenage years? Was that when you were interested in poker, or what were you focused on at that time? And where were you born as well?
Yeah, so I was born in Pensacola, Florida. There was no casinos, no gambling in Pensacola, Florida. The closest place was Biloxi, Mississippi, which is about a 2-hour drive away. And so I didn't know anything about poker, gambling, etc. But I played a lot of games as a kid. I was decently good at chess, and I found a game, Magic the Gathering, that I was really good at as well. And I would go play Magic the Gathering tournaments. This is a card game, kind of a mixture between chess and poker. It also has some financial implications with trading, which is neat as well, like baseball cards or whatnot. So anyway, we would play Magic tournaments every 2 or 3 days, and I would play. I was a very good Magic player there. And one day, another one of the players said, why don't we play a $1 buy-in poker tournament, tiny stakes, after the Magic tournament? So we all said, sure. We all put up our dollar, and it turns out that guy and one other guy won almost every time. And I knew chess was a skill game. I knew Magic was a skill game, and I thought maybe this poker's a skill game. So I bought a few poker books, and I studied them, I read them, and then I put $50 into an online poker site called Party Poker and started playing tiny stakes games. I played, I think, 25-cent, 50-cent Limit Hold'em. Limit Hold'em's kind of a dead game now. This was, 15 years ago, 17 years ago, whatever it was, 2003, 18 years ago. Goodness, time flies. So I played tiny stakes games, and over the next few years, I turned the $50 into something like $350,000 by the time I was 21. So
Wow.
We grinded it up. I eventually transitioned to No Limit Hold'em, which became popular back in that time, and I got very good at a particular format called sit and goes, which are essentially 9-person tournaments. Everyone buys in for, let's say, $100, and then the winner gets 50% of the prize pool. Second place gets 30%. Third place gets 20%. And that's it. Everybody else gets nothing. These were very fast-structured tournaments that resulted in you becoming very shallow stacked quickly. And as the stacks get shallow, it becomes more of a straight math game. Because there's no, reading people or anything like that online to some extent. So you just follow what the math says, and there were a few programs out there that I had access to that apparently other people did not, or they didn't use them properly. And that resulted in me being a big winner in those games.
Wow.
So by the time I was 21, I was making, $30,000 or $40,000 a month playing this really easy mathematical game. And that resulted in me dropping out of college because I was making a bunch of money back then. And when I turned 21, I started playing live poker tournaments because I was watching people on the World Poker Tour and World Series of Poker play, and I thought I could probably play better than them. So that sort of gave me my launching pad into the live poker space, the fact that I studied that game a lot. And that was that.
Okay.
But whenever I was 19 to 21, all I really did was play poker and study poker, 14 hours a day, every day. And that will make you really good at poker or whatever you're doing, but pretty bad at everything else in life. So I had no friends, no good relationships or anything like that. And it's tough because I don't know if I would recommend that to people because it's probably not good for your mental well-being to sit in your room all day studying poker and playing poker. And at the same time, if I look at a lot of the best poker players in the world, they've all done that exact same thing. So to get really good at anything, I do think you need to have some period of time where you just go really, really deep on it and learn as much as you possibly can.
Okay, now I want to continue the poker story, but I have to go back to the Magic years. I was actually a Magic the Gathering player in Australia at sort of the mid to late 90s. Is that when you were sort of playing? Were you playing the Pro Tour around then?
I did not play the Pro Tour.
Okay.
I qualified for it, I think, twice, but I didn't get to go because I was, 15 years old or whatever. My parents wouldn't let me go to China or wherever they had it. I think it was, I don't know what it was. Anyway, there were a few, I was playing like locally at, I would travel to Louisiana and South Florida to play tournaments, and I was not like the best player in the world or anything. I played a lot of vintage. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on how you look at it, where I lived, they played a lot of vintage because a lot of people just wanted to play with the cards they had. This is a format where you get to play with all the cards. And I was, I guess, better than them. And at Magic, in vintage, it's unfair to some extent where you get to have just way better cards than your opponents. So then I would never lose. Me and one other guy had all the good cards. Everybody else did not have good cards. So me and the other guy won every tournament. Okay. So I got to be number 11 in the world ranked in vintage at one point. In vintage. And
does that mean you have
probably, they got rid of the rankings a long time ago, but I looked it up. I was still number 15 or something, despite not playing in many years. The rankings are clearly silly, though.
Yeah, they were fun to look at. But I'm curious then, if you played vintage, and this really ties into, I guess we look at today's world of Magic the Gathering, you look at like a Black Lotus card or the Power 9, those are investments in themselves. So did you have and still have those cards from back in the day, or? Yeah,
so I had a very good Magic collection back in the day, and I was working a job at an airport that resulted in me. I played a Magic tournament one day. I got home at 4 a.m., had to be at work at 6 a.m. the next day. Okay, got home, left all my stuff in the car, went to sleep, and somebody robbed me. So they took all of my good Magic cards. But I went back. I remember I bought a deck for like $20 out of the common bin or whatever, grinded it back up, and had a good collection then. After I got into poker, though, I played no Magic, because if you're making many hundreds of dollars per hour playing poker, why in the world would you go play Magic to make no money? So I stopped playing Magic, and then it must have been about 10 years ago, I sold my collection for $20,000 or something, which, is a good amount of money, but I don't know, today it'd probably be worth $1 million or something. Yeah. And then something I don't know, it must be 8 years ago or so now, I just started buying up Magic cards, because I noticed the Power 9 had not really increased recently. These are expensive Magic cards. And Dual Land, same thing. I thought they were all relatively cheap at $100 per card or whatever it was. So now I have a pretty big collection again. I have a Instagram account called Daily Magic Muse, where I post a Magic card whenever I feel like it. I used to post every day, but whenever I feel like it. And I have a pretty big collection. I'm really into signed and altered cards. Oh. I also noticed that it's going to sound a little bit morbid, but if the artist of the card dies, that card goes way up in value if it is signed and or there is art on it. And so I have an altered Power 9 set. All of my dual lands are altered in some way by the original artist. Wow. And that may pay off. It may not. I think it will, though. And it's good to have fun, unique stuff that's kind of high end. It's almost like art, right? There's one Mona Lisa or whatever, and it's incredibly valuable, right? And so there's only one altered Black Lotus like mine by Christopher Rush, and sitting right down there on the floor.
Wow.
So anyway.
Is it a beta or unlimited? Or
No. You do not want to get the beta ones altered, because the beta ones are worth a lot more money. You want to get the unlimited beat up ones altered.
Got it.
Because then you can't really decrease the card's value all that much, because from a collectible point of view, if a card is in pristine mint condition, you don't really want to mess that up. But if the card's already the lowest grade it can be within reason, you can't really make it any worse.
Right.
So it only improves the value to get it altered at that point.
Makes sense. And I can see why you're into NFTs if we fast forward to the present, and the collectible, individual, unique aspect of that would tie in very, very nicely.
Oh gosh, who knows? It's tough because, who knows? It's a bit of a gamble,
yeah.
But you find spots you think are good, you load in and pray.
Well, who would have thought that Magic the Gathering is still here today, 30 plus years-ish ago, and these cards are worth so much? I would never have guessed that when I was playing.
So funny enough, my parents were just in town, and my mom brought, it was called a memory book from when I was in 8th grade. And there was a page on it on my 3 favorite things. They were computers. It was like an Apple computer. Magic the Gathering, and what was the other one? Gosh, there was one other one. Oh, Nintendo.
Of course.
And I was thinking, if I had invested in those 3 things back in the day, I would just be filthy rich.
Yeah, that's the irony.
Because, all of those stocks have gone through the roof. And instead, I didn't. I just played the games, and now we're not.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing well off. But you know what I'm saying, right? Like, and the page was called, like, Fantastic Fads. I'm like, look, this wasn't a fad. All 3 of these things are booming.
That's awesome. No, it's funny, too, because then we become adults and we start something else, in your case, poker, and that becomes our main focus. But it's not that unusual. I remember when I was playing Magic, there were so many people who went for Magic. It was like a gateway drug into poker, a professional poker, I feel like. So can we continue your story, switching back to Pokerland? So you're making like 30,000-ish a month playing online with your sort of mathematical formula, which is not a guaranteed win, but it sounded like at that time it was certainly an advantage for you. What happened next? Like, do you save that money? Like, how does a poker player think about this? Are you buying property on the side? Are you thinking, I want to graduate to bigger tournaments, so I need more money to buy in? Like, what's the philosophy there?
It's a bunch of questions there. So first things first, all you really have to do to win at poker is find a game you can beat, play it a ton, and keep a proper bankroll. Okay. So back then, I was playing these $200 buy-in sit-and-go tournaments, 9-person tournaments, and my edge was relatively small. I would win $5 or $10 per game, but I would then play 3,000 or 4,000 of them each month. And it turns out, if you're putting in a lot of volume, even with a relatively low edge, you just can't lose. I think I had 2 losing months, and they were marginally losing months over the course of 2 years doing this. And that's just how it works, right? If at the end of the day, volume cures variance to some extent, where you'll have swings, but you just know they don't matter because you are a clearly proven winner. Now, in games like multi-table tournaments with a lot of people, 100 people or 10,000 people, there's going to be way more variance, right? And that's why, volume becomes very important. You want to play a lot of games, and that makes it to where you essentially get to the long run at some point. And as you are playing games with more and more people, like 500-person tournaments or 1,000-person tournaments, you need a proportionally bigger and bigger bankroll, because you don't win a 500-person tournament all that often, whereas you win a 9-person tournament pretty often, right? Even if you're break even, you win at 1 in 9 compared to 1 in 500. So if you only get a good payout 1 in 500 or 1 in 200 or whatever it is, if you play 1 game per day, you're going to get 1 or 2 good scores per year, which is not very often, right? So I realized that a long time ago, and I've always put in a lot of volume purposefully whenever I am playing, and I still do that today. Whenever I play, I try to play as much as I reasonably can in the time I have allotted. But so, back then, what did I do? So by the time I turned 21, I had about $350,000, which is a good amount. Probably not quite enough to be playing the highest stakes live tournaments back then, which were $10,000 buy-in games. In reality, you probably need, I don't know, $1.5 million, give or take. So the first year I played, I was playing mostly $1,000 tournaments, $1,500 tournaments, which are still most of the tournaments that exist. And I did very poorly for the first year. I lost about $200,000, which is, frustrating, but I understand why. It's because I was really good at that short stacked mathematical poker game. I was not good at the deeper stacked game because I had not studied it at all, right? I was really good at a particular form of poker, but not the form of poker that was being played in live casinos, where you're playing deeper stacked and the payout structure is very different. Remember back to the 9-handed tournaments, 33% of the people get money back, whereas in a multi-table tournament in casinos that you see on TV, something like 10% of the people or 15% of the people get money back. So the payout structure is very different. Also, if you win a 9-person tournament, you get 4 or 5 buy-ins, right? So if you buy in for $200, you get $900 back, let's say. But if you buy into a $200 tournament with 1,000 people, you may win back, $60,000, right? It's like a substantial amount more. So the payout structure was very different, and I did not properly adjust to those things for a while. But I was always talking to other good poker players on poker forums and studying from them. And I eventually realized the error in my ways, and things started going better. When I was 22, I had a good score in the Bahamas, and that was a 5th place in a World Poker Tour tournament for $320,000, which, is quite nice. Going back to backing, I was backed then, but I still got to keep a large chunk of it. And we kept grinding it up.
So that means take the winnings you get, put it into the next tournament, winnings, that sort of thing? Or?
Yeah. Well, so you asked, what do we do with the money?
Yeah, what do you do
back then?
At 23, too.
You essentially Well, I made a few errors with money back in the day. Well, I call them errors. Looking back, it's like fine, but my parents always taught me you're supposed to go to school, get a degree, buy a house, and then you're set. So I bought a condominium with my money when I was like 19 years old.
Oh.
So I had that $320K, but then I put like $100,000 of it down on this condominium that was effectively paying it off. But then that kind of locks up that $100,000, and for all practical purposes, it's just gone, right? Mm-hmm. So when I was 20, I went on a bit of a downswing at some point. I forget exactly how this went, but I resolved that I was going to move down to the small stakes games and just win 100 buy-ins at every level. So I was going to play $10 games, win 100 buy-ins. If I won that, I'd move up to 20, then 30, then 50, then 100. And over the course of a few months, I got back to the top. But there was one point where, I forget exactly how the numbers work, but like half my money was locked up in this house, and I really didn't want to go broke. Some poker players think it's exciting or extravagant to feel risk and to feel excited and feel adrenaline when you're playing, but I want none of that. I just want to be printing my money, right? I just want to show up, use my skills, print money, and not worry about not being able to eat or having a roof over my head, right? So I've always been a little bit more conservative with my bankroll in general than some poker players, especially the old school poker players who were like often either really rich or really broke. But I think a lot of people who came up in poker like I did have been relatively conservative with their bankroll to the point that they're never really at risk. And, locking up a third of my money, it made it to where I did not have the opportunity to play bigger games profitably that I otherwise could have done if I did not do that. That said, the alternative would be to rent a place, and that's sometimes good, sometimes bad. It depends on your life scenario. But as a young kid, I did not need to be buying a house because who knows if I'm going to continue living in that exact place for any amount of time. And that was probably a mistake. But whatever, it's fine. The money's locked up. It does okay. It's not like it's the end of the world.
It's hard to say. Like your risk profile at that age meant you probably would have been happy to put more money into riskier things than a property. At the same time, it's the most common advice we get from most generations is to buy a property as soon as you can. It's safe, it's consistent. So and it sounds like you kind of did both. You still managed to have a start of a poker career, right? So
yeah. So what I did is after I started winning poker tournaments, I eventually won a tournament for $1 million and another one for $1 million. And I was the player of the year, and a bunch more trophies up here for all the people who are watching the video. It was all like, we did pretty well, right? And every time so eventually you don't need any more money in your bankroll because your bankroll is so big to the point that you are properly bankrolled for the games. So I mentioned we needed $1.5 million to play these tournaments. Anything more than $1.5 million in theory should be invested in something else because it's just sitting around not really doing anything for you. Right. And back then they did not really have tournaments bigger than $10,000. That's very different today. But back then that was kind of like the biggest that you could play. So once we got above some amount, I would start buying a house every time and then using it either to live in or to rent out. And I think I ended up with 4 places over the course of a few years, and they were all generating some amount of rental income, and that was good. What a lot of poker players do with their money initially when they win is they go out and they party and they blow it. But I never really had that issue. If anything, my quote-unquote leak was locking up money to the point that sometimes I would have liked to be able to access it, but I couldn't, right? So I would not necessarily recommend it, like real estate to poker players, particularly because it's not liquid. You kind of want your money to be in something that ideally returns capital, but is also liquid. Go back to angel investments. Probably not the best investment for most people because that money's super locked up. At least you can sell a house if you need to. You can't really sell a small fraction of a company that is 2 years into existence. It's not worth a ton of money. But that said, as you get more and more money, you need to find more and more ways to lock it up in a diversified way or in ways that you just enjoy that you think will be reasonably profitable. And I mean, that's what I do. I've been lucky to the point that I've been able to lock up some money, right? A lot of poker players find themselves in a spot where, let's say their bills are $5,000 per month and they make $6,000 per month on average playing. And so they're not really banking a ton of money each month. Mm-hmm. But I was always like, I tried to live relatively cheaply. Like I never flew first class or never stayed in nice suites or anything. And I didn't I was reasonable is what it amounts to. A lot of poker players, when they get a hold of $1 million, they start being very unreasonable. And, they start flying first class everywhere and staying in the biggest suite in the place. And I recognized that I had been relatively fortunate to win a few big tournaments. And I realized I could easily go on a downswing because I remembered back to my first year of playing live poker. I lost everything for 6 months. And I've had multiple bad downswings in live tournaments since then. And in between those two scores, right? And it happens. And I understand the variance that is inherent to poker, and I plan for it to some extent. I don't just think I'm going to continue winning indefinitely. Because, I mean, look, whenever you play, you have an edge, but you only really cash out that edge in tournaments when you win one of the big tournaments, which happens 1 in 100 times, which just isn't that often. And if it's a 1 in 100 shot, you may not get it for 500 tournaments.
Right. Which leads me to a question. What does it take to get to the point where you even have that 1 in 100 chance to win like $1 million return in poker? Like what changed even your own like life practice, skill set? How much is practice versus luck versus just time playing, those sorts of things?
Well, so a lot of people view poker as a get-rich-quick scheme to the point that they try to win that $1 million. They see people like Chris Moneymaker, who turned whatever it was, $25 into $2.5 million on ESPN when he won the World Series of Poker back in 2003, and thought, "Oh, I'd like to do that." Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, obviously. But it turns out poker's a great way to get rich slowly, but a really bad way to get rich quickly. Because then you're just kind of treating it like a parlay. Like imagine you had to watch the baseball games today and pick 5 of them. They all have to win. It's easier said than done. It's like really, really hard to do that, even if you bet on all the favorites. And that's kind of how a lot of people treat poker. I mean, every year, a lot of people play locally in games they can beat, and they play a lot, and they win $5,000 or $10,000. And then they take all of that money and they go out to the World Series of Poker, which is a big poker tournament series in Las Vegas, and they play way bigger than they normally do, because at home maybe they play $100 games, but at the World Series they play $1,500 games, and they give themselves a few shots to try to get rich and win a 1,000-person tournament. And they almost always all go home broke. And then they do it again the next year. They try to win $10,000, or they win $10,000, take it back out, lose it again. And yeah, you get rich sometimes, but why would you not just grind at home and make $10,000 for, let's say, 5 years? Now you have $50,000. You can go out there, play $500 tournaments with 100 buy-ins and give yourself a real shot to actually grind it up. But instead they want to try to get rich, and that results in most people failing. So the idea of how do you get in a space where you can win $1 million in a poker tournament, you can go about it in a lot of ways. You can gamble really hard, or you can be really nitty. And I've been pretty cautious with my bankroll in those situations, and that's given me actually a good shot to do it, because I was willing to sit there and grind it out by myself in my room for 14 hours a day for 3 years straight to get a hold of some money, right? And then when I played live tournaments for the first year, I played like every small stakes tournament, because I realized that's what I needed to do. I was not properly bankrolled for the big games. And if I did hop right into the big games, when I turned 21, I would have lost all my money, would have gone broke, because I probably lost 50 buy-ins, but 50 $300 buy-ins is only $15,000 or whatever it is, right? Whereas 50 $10,000 buy-ins is $500,000, and I only had 350. So, and 100 of it was locked up, so I would have gone broke if I just hopped right into the biggest game. So I try to be reasonable with it, right?
When you say that, though, a lot of this is, it sounds like you're crunching numbers, but how much of this is simply you getting better as a poker player?
Yeah, ideally you want to get better. Well, so going back to the things you have to do to succeed, you have to find a game you can beat, right? Okay. Find a game you can beat, play it a lot, keep a proper bankroll, and you can either find a game you can beat by playing with worse opponents, or by improving your skills to the point that people who are equally skilled to you become worse opponents, right? If you look at a lot of the biggest winners in poker, actually, they are not actually all that good at poker. They just play in really soft games. They are people who play like private games in Los Angeles with celebrities, or hedge fund managers in New York who play, and they don't let pros play. It's just like a bunch of okay poker players playing. But if they're playing gigantic stakes and someone there is the best player, someone's usually the best player, that player's going to be a gigantic winner. Mm-hmm. And
this is like Molly's game.
You have to find a game you can beat, right? So you either do that by selecting your game better, or just substantially improving your skills. Now, I always realize that you want to be as good as you possibly can, because, like in chess, for example, if you're just worse than your opponent, you lose, right? And at the end of the day, if you look at poker, the best player just like always wins in the long run. It's like there is no gamble in it in the long run. You just have to get to the long run. Okay,
so in your own personal journey, it was simply a case of just graduating up each level in terms of both your bankroll, your skill set, and then you play enough, eventually you start winning, the bigger numbers, basically.
Right, and the thing is you make some amount of return on investment every time you play a poker tournament. It's kind of hard to know exactly what it is, but it is some positive or negative number, right? And if you are adequately skilled at assessing player strengths, you can kind of figure out if you're going to win or lose money. And if I don't think a game is good, I just don't play it because I'm not going to play poker in to get my gamble on. I'm going to try to win money. A good example of this, one time I flew to Los Angeles to play a $10,000 buy-in tournament. That is always a good tournament. They have a lot of people in it. There's things called satellite poker tournaments where people buy in for like 1/10 of the buy-in, and then 1 in 10 gets their way into the bigger tournament. They're trying to parlay it and get rich quick. You want to play with those players because they're usually not adequately skilled, right? But the day before this $10,000 buy-in tournament, there was a $5,000 tournament with no satellite qualifiers. So the main event was going to have 1,000 people. There were a lot of bad players. It was going to be great. But this $5,000 tournament, smaller buy-in, had 60 people in it, and they were all really, really good. So I flew to Los Angeles, looked at this tournament, just didn't play, right? Even though I was probably slightly profitable in the game, my return on investment there may be, 5% or 10%. So I really want to sit there for 2 days, or a day, or however long it took, to win $250. And the answer is no, I wouldn't. I'd rather sleep. And funny enough, I actually went and played cash games, a different form of poker that I play. And there were like no good players in the cash game because they were all having ego battles in this $5,000 tournament. So I ended up winning like $20,000 in the cash games over the course of that day because the games were super soft. There were no good pros in it. So that's a good example of like game selection, right? Like I flew across the country to play that tournament, yet the tournament didn't look good, so I didn't play it. So you have to have good discipline like that. I was actually just in Vegas recently. They had the U.S. Poker Open, which was a series put on by Poker Go, which puts on a lot of live tournaments. They stream on the internet. People can check that out at pokergo.com. And you could re-enter the tournaments if you lost. So for like 6 hours or something like that, if you played the tournament and lose, you could play it again. There was one day where I had the option to re-enter, and I just didn't because I looked around the field, the people still playing, and they were all very good. The weaker players had all busted too. So it would be me re-entering in a game with a bunch of very good players. Like, there's no edge. Another day, I busted, and there were a bunch of bad players still in the field, so I happily re-entered, right? And that's because I realize I'm going to be in good shape against the weaker players and marginal shape against the best players in the world, right? So you want to make sure you're finding games that you are profitable in. And this applies to like all forms of investing, right? Like if you don't know what you're doing and your opponents know better than you, you're probably not going to do so well.
Right, which is why we might choose someone like Jason and be part of a syndicate because he's the one putting in the time to select the companies to invest in and so on.
Well, that kind of goes to the idea of like poker backing, where you ideally want to be backing good players, where you give them money to buy a percentage of their action.
Do you ever back other players? Or
I have a piece of a backing company called Pocar.com, Pocarr.com. Essentially what they do is they take players at the smallest stakes games, like $5 buy-in tournaments online, and teach them to the point that they become some of the biggest winners. The number one player in the world I mentioned earlier used to be a backee there. And, he won all the money for them, right? So, I don't know, they back some number of hundreds of players online. And it's like another low-risk way to make money because they're putting in a bunch of volume, right? It's not like, so today, imagine there's 100 players playing for me, I don't know, a 25 cent poker tournament on average, right? Because I have a tiny piece of everybody. And that's great, right? I just collect the money, collect the profit.
A little army of poker players every day.
That's exactly right. Other players do this in a much more gambly way. Like I still sell action whenever I play, $25,000 buy-in tournaments or higher. And then I essentially sell people action at a tiny markup, meaning let's say it's a $100,000 tournament. 1% would normally cost, let's say, $1,000, right? Maybe I charge $1,020. You may say, why even charge the extra bit? Because in theory, I think I have a bigger edge than that 2% VIG I'm charging. Maybe we have an 8% edge or something. So then what happens is me and the backer split that difference. Some people get egregious with the markup, though, and they charge like a 20% VIG. And that's only good if you are a lot better than your opponents. But if you're a lot better than your opponents, why do you need to get backed? Right? So I'm not going to say they're necessarily scammers, but there are people out there who try to essentially take advantage of people, and you want to make sure you are not one of those. You always want to make sure if you are selling action, your markup is reasonable. And I mean, I suppose this happens in investing as well, right? Some people's syndicates charge a ton, some charge a little. You have to figure out, is there an edge there? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. It's hard to know.
I have a question regarding, poker as an ecosystem. There's a lot of things that have sort of come on the sides, as they sometimes say, the picks and shovels that support the poker players, or the different ways to monetize poker without actually being the person to play poker, like supporting someone, backing someone. When did you start looking at that as an option? Because if you had made, you had a couple of $1 million results there, you must have been still thinking, this is my career, I'm a professional poker player, I play this game for a living. But now you're a coach, you just said you're part owner of a backing company. When did that start in your mindset as something you thought would be smart to do?
I don't know if it ever really occurred to me that I was doing it. I used to post on various poker forums where I would get advice from people and I would give advice to them, right? And it turns out a lot of people liked the advice I freely gave to other people, and that makes you a valued member of the community, right? I eventually made a training site with two other guys that taught people how to beat sit and goes, which probably wasn't the smartest idea because it was an easy game. And it turns out sit and goes today are not really all that profitable. No one wins at them. So that's a bummer. That game's dead. You
killed it.
Right? Because people may ask, why don't you just keep doing that? Because the game's not hard. Everybody learned, and now nobody wins. You can't find a game you can beat anymore at the medium or high stakes.
So you were kind of partially responsible for killing the game that you started in poker with.
I was unfortunately very responsible for killing that game, okay. Which is a bummer. It's funny. Today I have people come up to me all the time like, oh yeah, I used to watch the sit and go videos you made, and I beat them until they died. I'm like, yeah, well, so did I. So anyway, that's unfortunate. So you have to be a little bit careful that you don't make the game unbeatable. But now, how did I get into this? So I was making videos for a training site it was a European poker site. Doesn't really matter what it was. And another person there was the owner of a publishing company, D&B Poker, which I'm now a part of. And they asked me to write a book because they love my videos, they love my posts on the forum, and they thought I could make a good poker book. They didn't have a book on poker tournaments. They asked me to write it. And I had already taken on a few private students. And what I would do is every time they would ask me a question, I would just write an article about it. So I could give it to anybody else who asked me the same question, right? Mm-hmm. Essentially scaling back then before I knew what scaling was. And I would write an article one time and be able to share it with whoever wanted it whenever it made sense. And I actually had 400 pages of articles written on various topics already. Because, you ask me a question about a topic, I'll write a page or two about it. There it is. We're good to go. I had about 400 pages worth. And I made an outline for a book, and we put it all together. There were a few spots I had to go through and fill out, that I had not written about. But I had them a 500-page book in something like 2 weeks. I'm like, oh my God, how'd this guy write a 500-page book in 2 weeks? But I already had it done, right? I didn't even know I was doing it. But I mean, how did I get into it in the first place? I was helped by a lot of people. I would not be where I am today without the help of people who came before me and are still crushing the biggest games. And it seems reasonable to give back to other people, right? I mean, they help you, you help other people, you help them in whatever ways you can, and you all build and grow together. Poker looks like a solitary game, but to some extent, it's kind of a team sport where you're not the best at a lot of things, and I'm not the best at a lot of things, but somebody else may be, and you can help them with that. I was not really good at playing deep stack poker, so I had to learn a lot from other people, but I was really good at playing the shallow stacked form of poker. So I helped a lot of people with that when they were not so good at it, right? Mm-hmm. And, you take your weaknesses and try to improve using other people's strengths. And I was just naturally doing this, and some people took notice and wanted me to work with them. We wrote books. The books sold really well. And we had the training site that killed the sit and goes. So we eventually moved to multi-table tournaments, which is the most popular form of poker that you see on TV, and we started making content for that. Eventually, the other two guys in the business got out. I took it over. It went through a few iterations, but eventually we are where we are today. The training site was
that poker coaching?
Because I had this training.
When you say
this was before it was called pokercoaching.com.
Okay.
It's been through a few other iterations. The names don't matter because they're no longer here. But I basically had a site that was losing money. We had, 100 members instead of 5,000. And I was paying coaches $500 per hour to make content, which is, kind of expensive, but that's their hourly rate, roughly. That's what they wanted, so whatever, you pay. And I was just losing $3,000 or $4,000 per month for 2 or 3 years. And I didn't really care because I'd made plenty of money from poker. I viewed it as almost like a community service to some extent. Because, if I can spend a little bit of money to get good, high-quality content from good players, share it with other people, lose a little bit of money, who cares, right? One day, I'd actually just broken up with my fiance, who's not my fiance today. I have a different wife. I have a wife now who's a different woman who's very great. Anyway, I'd just broken up with my fiance. This must have been 15 years ago or something. Mm-hmm. And I was at a a local casino, and I just like randomly played a small buy-in tournament to pass the time while I was drinking sob wine. And so I met a guy there who had just gotten out of a few marketing classes, and he said, look, I know you have your training site. He asked how I was doing. I said, not great. He said, why don't you make me a video of you playing multi-table tournaments online, and I'll try to sell it through affiliates on this site called ClickBank, which still exists. It's an affiliate site where people can just sell your stuff if they like it. So I made an 8-hour-long video of me just playing online tournaments all day, and I won a ton of buy-ins. Like, I don't even know what it was, but I smashed them. So it looked really good. And then he sold it, or started selling it through affiliates, and we made like $10,000 in the first month. I'm like, oh, this is good, because I was losing money, and now I'm getting paid $10,000 a month for this one 8-hour video. So he's been with me since then. His name's Dan. He's great. And he does all of our email marketing, and it was me and him for a long time, and eventually we hired on more people to help with all sorts of other stuff. But it's kind of how I got into the content space. I had my own training site that was failing, and I probably would have gave up on that at some point. And met up with Dan, and Dan made it successful.
Okay, do you mind talking a little bit about that? Because the difference between 100 members and 5,500 members in a membership site is huge. That's, like you said, losing money to making a lot of money. And my audience being very much in the information marketing space, they're always interested in how you scale something like this and what's the nuts and bolts. So I could think it's paid ads. I mean, ClickBank obviously is a marketplace that can get you some customers, but I don't think it scales you to 5,500, or maybe it does. But what's worked for you guys really well?
We don't do any of that stuff anymore. That was good to get off the ground, and it proved Dan knew what he was doing to some extent. So we had the failing training site. We immediately cut some of the more expensive content creators to make that basically break even, to where it became more of a Jonathan Little site instead of a me and other people site. Because I was not the biggest name person on the site back then. So we got rid of some of the people, and we made that profitable immediately, right? So there we go. We're not losing $40,000 a year, whatever it is. Good. And we have this individual product called Jonathan Little Secrets. We're selling and making $10,000 per month, which is good. We kind of chugged along just making more and more new products, right? I did not do any email marketing back in the day, but Dan was very good at that. So he was in charge of the email list. Okay. I was not good at web design. Dan could do that well enough. So he did basically everything that I could not do.
Do you know
I was in charge of the content. Dan was in charge of everything else.
Do you know how he grew the email list, just out of curiosity?
Well, ClickBank to some extent got a lot of people on the email list, but also I would just start promoting it. I was already writing articles for various poker-related publications, like Card Player Magazine. They put that out in every local casino, and at the end we'd say, check out this website to learn more, and people would get on the email list. We had lead magnets, right? We had a lot of free stuff we'd give away. It's good that I have a lot of free articles, and I can make videos relatively easily, right?
So content marketing.
That's basically it. Okay. I have books, right? My books. Anybody who buys one of my books, there's a lead magnet in there to say, to get this bonus, go here, get on the email list, and to get people on the email list. And we continued selling individual products for $100 each for quite a while. But then something like 3 or 4 years ago, actually, I'm sure I'm getting the timeline wrong. I don't know, call it 5 years ago. I knew I kind of wanted to slow down, have a family, and be able to stay at home if I felt inclined. And, $10,000 per month is good. I live in Manhattan. It's expensive here. Need to figure out a way to either, play poker from home and make a ton of money, which is kind of hard in today's environment from America, or make this training site good. So I started spending a ton of time on it. Instead of making one 4 or 6 hour video per month, I was now just making a lot of content. And I also realized we needed to revamp the training site to make it very different than all the other training sites on the market. And pretty much all the training sites back then were just me either presenting over a PowerPoint or me playing poker and letting you watch. And that was it. There are 3 or 4 other sites on the market. That's still all they do today for the most part. Okay. We started doing a lot of interactive stuff, like live streams where you can ask your questions, or let the students call in and we answer their questions in real time. Basically started doing a lot of live things. We also have the 1,200 interactive quizzes where it's kind of like you can go through and play hands and then get immediate feedback from me or one of the other coaches, right? I also, it's going to sound bad, I realized people like me. So I started to try to interact more with the fans, right? this was kind of before Twitter to some extent, and maybe it wasn't before Twitter. Before Twitter was super popular, and I got on Twitter and started interacting with people, right, and like replying. And a lot of people were like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you replied." But I reply to everyone. I read every single email that comes in today, and I reply as it makes sense, right? So basically, I got in there and I did the work, and I made friends with a lot of people, right? And I tried to add value, whereas a lot of other people want to show up, do 4 hours of work per month, and be done. I decided to turn this into a 50-hour work week job and make loads and loads and loads of content. And that's resulted in other people wanting to work with me and other people wanting to promote the site, right? So anyway, a switch we made 3 years ago was to stop selling individual products and just put everything we had in the past and everything we're going to make in the future into the Poker Coaching Premium membership, which costs something like $100 per month. We run sales for it. I'm not sure if I'm a huge fan of sales or not, but they seem to work. Dan's good at the sales. I'd rather never put anything on sale, but I think that may be a big portion of our success. And it's tough to know, right? Is one way better or not? I don't know. It's probably better. Sure it's better. But
well, deadlines work.
Instead of having to sell a product every single month, now people just get in the membership and know they can get a whole lot of stuff included, right? And that makes email promotion way easier because now we just have to get really good at promoting one thing, which is this gigantic membership that has infinite content, like more than the vast majority of other training sites out there, that's also interactive. And it's kind of like an easy sell because it's just jam-packed with value. The other sites are trying to sell an 8-hour course for $1,000. We're trying to sell, 5,000 hours of content for $100, right? It's just kind of a no-brainer. So that was very beneficial. Also, I started making a lot of YouTube content. I hired a YouTube editor who was actually an editor at one of the big poker news sites, got laid off because of COVID recently, and started making a ton of YouTube content. We almost have 100,000 YouTube subscribers now, and that had like none 2 years ago. So that's just making free content, getting people on the email list, going to pokercoaching.com/free, right? Doing stuff like this. And that gets people on the list. And then, Dan's in charge from there. Dan has all the content he could possibly need to make good email promotions and like added value emails too. It's not like we're just sending an email saying, buy this thing. Good example of this today. I'm doing a webinar where I'm going to go through 4 like really high level hands that I played on YouTube live, completely free. And then that's going to take 45 minutes. And then for 15 minutes after that, I'm going to promote our next sale that we're doing for Independence Day, right? And I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 people will watch that. And some of those people will like the content. They'll find added value and then they'll go look at it and maybe they buy, right? And we do that on a regular basis. Have a sale every month or two, every month, give or take. We do a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
we do a lot of stuff.
Sounds like you do. It's a lot of content.
Really, you just try to add a lot of value. There's this trophy back here. That's for me being Poker Personality of the Year in 2019, which is a award voted on by poker fans. Wow. They didn't have a 2021 because of COVID. There were no award ceremonies. But like, if you do good work and add a lot of value and try to be reasonably accessible, people take notice and they like it. It's what it amounts to. And if people like you, then they will inevitably take a look at what else you have to offer.
Yeah, sounds like
I think a lot of people, especially a lot of like training site brands, make the error to some extent of not highlighting the person, right? There's like, here's some content with a bunch of basically random people who don't interact with anyone. Take a look. They'll make you better at poker, probably, but nobody cares, right? You have to make people care for some reason. People care because they like you. I mean, like there are people who stream Magic the Gathering who I love, right? Not even play Magic really anymore, but I still watch their streams sometimes because I like them. They're personable. I like the way they operate. And if they had a training site, I'd probably subscribe to it, right? And maybe that's what's happening here as well.
No, it's a great example of the power of being a really helpful. I mean, it's simply put, you're just helping a lot of people and you're being very approachable and personable about it. So if you do that for long enough, using as many different content distribution channels as you can, you're going to get attention, you're going to get email subscribers, and then you're going to be able to get customers as a result. So I can understand the big picture of the membership site with Dan as your kind of operational co-founder, I guess, in that business. Is that what you would consider your main gig now? Like you're really a coach membership site owner, or do you still play poker as much and consider yourself a professional player? Plus, I know you said you're starting a family, so you probably have a family by now. So things of, you don't have much time to do all of those things. Is that accurate?
So I have two boys now. They're 2 years old and 4 years old. So for the last 5 years or so, I have been working on the training site a ton. Before COVID happened, and I guess since COVID's happened, since it's almost over, it is over, whatever it is. I used to play about 1 week per month of live poker, and I would try to play a lot in that week. So I would go play very high value tournaments or tournament series. Like a long time ago, I would just play all the time. I just travel all the time and play whatever was available. And there are some tournament series where they have a main event that's like $3,500, right? And then a few small events before that are $1,000 buy-in tournaments. If you go and play that, you may make on average, $7,000 in the week, which is fine. But there are other tournament series where the main event is $10,000, and they have a bunch of other good side events where you may make $40,000 on average. There's going to be a ton of swings, but you can do just simple return on investment math and figure out, well, if I have to pick between one or the other, I'm going to pick the one that I can make more money at, right? So I'm very selective with the tournament series I go to some extent now. I mean, a good example, I just went to go play the U.S. Poker Open in Las Vegas, and every other day there was a $10,000 or $25,000 or $50,000 poker tournament for a week or 2 weeks, whatever it was. And that's like a good high-value tournament series where I know I'm going to go out there and make, $50,000, $100,000 on average, and that's going to be good. So instead of playing everything, I'm playing the highest value games. I also still try to play online poker, usually 1 day per week, Sunday afternoons. That's usually the best day to play online poker, just because that's how it is. Not worth talking about. So I still try to play some and stay very relevant, but I also work on the training site, like Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. every day. Wow. I sit in this office and I work all day, and that's something a lot of people don't do, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people want a side job that makes some money, but I'm not looking for a side job to make a little bit of money. I'm looking for a real job to make a lot of money. You talked about sponsorships before, and it's going to sound a little bit bad, but white American men cannot get sponsorship deals because there are no major poker sites that operate legally within America, right? And there's a lot of white American men who are good at poker, so it's we're not very different, mm-hmm. right? So a lot of people who get sponsored are not from America, from these poker sites. Or if you can get sponsorship deal, I've been offered a few very good sponsorship deals from sites that operate in America. You're now representing a company that's operating illegally, mm-hmm. and you don't really want to be the representative for an illegal gambling site. That seems unwise, especially if you have a family.
Just to clarify, why is it illegal in America?
I don't know, legislation, the government. I don't know. I mean, look, there's this thing called the UIGEA, unlawful internet. I don't know what it's called. There was a law passed a while back that was tacked on to a bill pertaining to 9/11, like the Freedom Act or something, that essentially made gambling online illegal in America. Now that has changed state by state to some extent now, so states are allowed to do whatever they want. So we see online poker now in Nevada, New Jersey, Delaware, a few other places. But you're playing with only people from those states. Mm. So inevitably, there just aren't a lot of people compared to a worldwide gambling site, right? And it turns out that money kind of trickles to the top from the bottom. People win at the small stakes, they lose it to the medium stakes. People win at the medium stakes, they lose it to the high stakes. People win at the high stakes, they lose it to the super high stakes, right? People at super high stakes cash it out. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that if there are not all that many small stakes players, there aren't very many middle stakes players and not very many high stakes players, and you can't really make a ton of money. You can make some good money. I have a few students who live in these places, and I've seen their graphs. They're just amazing and straight up because the games are soft because there aren't a lot of good players on the site, and they're winning, they probably win $100,000 per year, which is perfectly fine, but it's not like get rich money, right? It's fine and good, not get rich money. Right. So why is it illegal? Because there's a law that says it's illegal. Yeah. And that said, some companies still operate in America. One of them banned me recently because I said that they are not as safe as a U.S. regulated bank. You should not keep all your money in the unlicensed, unregulated, illegal gambling site. But they have representatives saying, keep all your money on there, it's perfectly safe. Mm. Well, it's just not, right? And I'm kind of a stickler for not inducing people to make detrimental errors, right? Back whenever it was called Black Friday, when a few of the poker sites were shut down by the U.S. government, a lot of people's money was locked up for years. Mm-hmm. And some of the sites never paid people back, or if they did pay people back, it was 5 cents on the dollar. And I don't want that to happen to my students, right? So, protect yourself,
Yeah.
be smart.
It's like holding money in a cryptocurrency
So anyway,
exchange. You just don't know what could happen.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, don't leave it all on an exchange. You might get hacked. Seems obvious, right? But you say that publicly, these sites will ban you because they don't want anyone talking bad about them. Fine, that's their prerogative, right? Should probably tell you how they operate in business.
Yeah.
Anyway, what were I going to? Oh, yeah, I do not want to be sponsored by an illegal gambling site, and even then, they don't pay like a ton of money. Back in the poker heyday of 2003, 2004, 2005, you could get a deal that paid you hundreds of thousands of dollars per year or more. Like if I was in the spot I am in poker back then, I'm sure I would have gotten a very, very good sponsorship deal. But that's not where we live anymore. We live in this era where not a lot of sites sponsor players. If they do sponsor players, it's for a small amount of money, like $3,000 per month, and they want you streaming live all the time on their online poker site, which I'm not going to do because I just don't have the time for it. And
you don't need to.
And I don't need to. So it's not worth the effort is what it amounts to. But I realized a long time ago, if I ever wanted to make money at poker by not playing poker, I either needed to get heavily in on the backing side or heavily in on the content creation side. So I did both, right? And to be fair, most people in the content creation space in general don't make any money or make a minimal amount of money. But you just have to get to scale is what it amounts to. You have to help a lot of people get better or enjoy what they do more, right? And I work hard to do that. But yeah, anyway, the idea a lot of people still have today is that I want to become a poker player and get a sponsorship deal. But this problem is that's not really worth any money, and it takes a ton of effort.
Okay. Jonathan, so we're kind of getting over an hour-ish, or just about an hour. I do have a few more questions. So this show is called Vested Capital, and we've already covered you were in property early on. Then it sounds like poker became your main source of capital and cash flow. Then it started to branch out to a few little like teaching businesses. Then it became poker coaching, which is obviously a big source of your cash flow now. You mentioned you're a part owner of the staking company that's got lots of hundreds of poker players that you own a little share of how well they do. You mentioned to me when we talked before we even record this that you were Bill Helmut's book launch party, and you're part owner of a publishing company that was to do with his book. So there's a lot of things going on. You have magic card investments, you have NFT investments. I'm assuming you probably have some crypto if we even talk about that. If we look back on everything you've done so far and where you're at now, what has been the most successful source of you building capital and cash flow in your life, if you're willing to share?
Well, so poker is really good to take a small amount of money and turn it into a pretty good amount of money, right? Like you can get a hold of $1 million playing poker, but you're not going to get a hold of $100 million playing poker. It's just not going to happen. So poker definitely, it was like all of my income for many years. But eventually you transition over. And, crypto's been fine. I haven't gotten rich off crypto. They got me on the ICOs back in the day, so that was great. Should have got into NFTs instead of ICOs. But that's fine. We're not, I'm still up, right? So call it what it is. That said, it could drop 50% today and I'd be down, right? But no, so like the substantial sources of income in my life have been poker, and that has slowly decreased as I've stayed home more, because if you don't play, you don't win any money. And I've been staying home, having a family, staying home because of COVID, etc. And now the training sites become the vast majority of my income. And that's just because that's the thing that has done the best. And it turns out I do pretty well when I do things in poker. I do not do especially well when I do things not in poker because I'm not an expert at it, right? Very, very important to invest most of your time and effort in things you're an expert at. How do you get good at something, though, if you don't try, is always the consideration. But you should try things, especially when you're young. But as you get older and older, I think you should probably try fewer things and focus on what you're very good at. I have a bunch of students. Some of them are like really good at investing. They're hedge fund managers and whatnot. And they're effectively my mentors, right? I help them with poker. They help me with life. And I always ask, like, should I be doing something else? And they say, until this poker training site somehow doesn't work, just keep doing this because it's by far your best opportunity. You like it and you're good at it, so don't screw it up. Yeah. A lot of people either get burnt out or get tired or get annoyed and they just want to change, right? But I've done things such as like hire other people to manage the business, to manage the coaches, etc. Things I don't really like necessarily doing, such that I can just make good content. And I like that. That's what I'm good at. And it makes it to where I can't really get burnt out from the poker coaching business, and it continues to grow. So whatever, I'm going to do this until there's a reason not to. But I always can't imagine it's going to continue growing because, like, how many more people could actually sign up? But it keeps growing, so whatever, we'll keep doing this indefinitely. Everything else, though, is a hobby to some extent that could take off. And to be fair, making training content was a hobby that could have taken off, right? Like I said before, I was losing thousands of dollars per month on this training site hobby. I was just okay with, right? I mean, like, it was fine. And it took off. Who knows? I mean, maybe if I stopped a month before I met Dan, maybe it would have just been dead, and that would have been that. Or, I mean, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
For all I know, ICOs could have taken off. They wouldn't have. They didn't, but they could have, right? I could have gotten into the one that actually did well, but I didn't. And you never really know what's going to happen in the future, and for that reason, you want to always keep your eyes open for things that you could get into. That said, pretty much everyone out there is really good at something, and you should probably be looking at that space more than others, even if that space is not especially, I don't know, popular, viable, whatever. Like, poker has been on a slow but steady decline since 2005 or so, to some extent.
Really?
Due to all sorts of things, right? Like, the bad players go broke and they quit. New players try to get in, but the game is tough, so they don't get into it. U.S. government makes it illegal to play online. Like, all these things are kind of negative towards it. And if you look at Google searches for poker and poker-related terms, they're all just, like, kind of down. And that means you just have to do a better job of helping people improve, right? But look, I mean, find what you're good at and focus on that to some extent, because that's where you have an area of expertise. I'm not an expert at cryptocurrency or property or gold or NFTs or any of this, so I dabble, right? And maybe the hobby takes off, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, well, we talked about angel investing right at the very start, and that's another thing that, who knows, we could be talking about in 5 years as a fairly big windfall, or not. You don't really know.
So I've made a few angel investments by myself before I met Jason Calacanis, and they all failed.
Okay.
And looking at how he goes about angel investing, he tries to find companies that already have pretty good product market fit, products that, or companies that have a lot of customers, things that are somewhat differentiated in relatively popular spaces or relatively like good spaces, right? Like, you'd probably not want to invest in a poker training site because, like I said, a slowly declining space, right? Especially a startup, because then you're competing with the other good companies like mine and a few others out there. So I like the way he goes about investing in things that make logical sense instead of things that you just like, right? And it's stuff like, I've invested in a few sites to play poker on, and they've all failed, but maybe they could have worked, right? It's hard to know. Businesses fail all the time for reasons outside of the founder's control, and I dabble, right? I'm not all in on it. I dabble. And I realized with angel investing, I don't know what I'm doing here. So you find experts and you follow them. And fortunately, with things like syndicates, you can sign up, get updates from various companies and learn what they're doing.
Yeah.
For example, through Jason, I've invested in Fitbod, which is a app that teaches you how to work out, basically. It's like a workout training app, a membership site. Sounds kind of like mine. I teach people to get good at poker. They teach people to get in shape. And I've learned a lot of stuff about like marketing through looking at what they do and hearing their founders talk. I can't talk. Hearing their founders talk. Tongue twister. You wouldn't think that was a tongue twister, but it was. So I'm always trying to learn about business and investing through other people who I've invested in. So I'm always trying to learn, right?
Oh, awesome. I really appreciate the breakdown. You're doing a lot of different things, but I love the message there that it's really one thing you got good at, and your biggest cash flow and capital sources that power all the other investments really came from poker and then teaching and supporting other poker players. So the obvious connection is there. Jonathan, let's wrap it up. Is there anything else you want to sort of share with the audience? Obviously, for websites, we've mentioned pokercoaching.com/free if you want to get started with that. Is there anything else you want to send people to or talk about?
People can follow me on Twitter at Jonathan Little. I post all sorts of poker-related content there. They can also check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/pokercoaching.
Awesome.
But that's it, Show up, do good work, add value, and good things will come.
Great. Well, I thank you for sharing the time, and it's been great to hear your story.
Thanks for having me.